Thank you very much for the very kind introduction and the very thoughtful question. The idea that there should be a standalone human right of freedom from official corruption is an idea that deserves the attention of all stakeholders, including your audience at this forum today. There is a gap. It's a curious gap in the international architecture for preventing corruption and for protecting human rights. And the gap is that there is no specific articulation of a right within any international law or convention or treaty that this freedom to live a life without corruption is something that should stand alone as a human right. Instead, what happens within this architecture is that the laws on human rights themselves acknowledge that when human rights are violated, it is often because there's corrupt action taking place. And then within the laws on preventing corruption, such as the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, there's no actual definition of corruption, and instead, UNCAC, as it's called, simply lists all the activities that are deemed corrupt and should be criminalized in society. So my argument in 2015, which I stand by, is that we should shift the paradigm and we should create a presumption that governments should protect the individual citizen's right to live a life free from corruption. Another way of stating the same proposition is in the affirmative. And the way I would state it is to say that there is a duty among civil servants to provide honest public service. This is fairly obvious, isn't it? We don't elect government officials or appoint civil servants with the expectation that they will steal from the citizenry. We appoint them and elect them with the expectation that they will provide their services honestly, efficiently, transparently, predictably, and that they will provide public services that all citizens are entitled to, such as education, housing, health, access to justice, and economic opportunity.
Thanks. And Mr. Murray, you noted that corruption is usually perceived only as a means of violating human rights rather than as a direct violation itself. In your opinion, why has the world still not recognized freedom from corruption as an inherent human right?
So that's an excellent question. And let me start by saying that the United Nations itself is making slow progress, inch by inch, step by step, towards recognizing corruption as freedom from corruption as a human right. Most recently, in this year, they've passed a resolution that recognized the negative impact of corruption on all human rights. And so that's a step in the right direction. And yet, it has not become the norm. It has not become the standard. And there is a whole legal argument over whether this could be done. And there are different sort of legal points of view on the question. From my point of view, Ukraine is already leading the world in the direction of creating this freedom through practice, through modeling, through demonstrating a commitment to this basic human right, starting with the Revolution of Dignity. In many ways, the Revolution of Dignity was a revolution over the right for entrepreneurs, for all Ukrainian citizens to create wealth, to join the European Union, to be able to protect that wealth, protect their private property. And so built into the Revolution of Dignity was this commitment to freedom from corruption, whether it's foreign corruption or local corruption. And now, of course, you're in the middle of a tragic war that is also has as one of its goals to assure that the gains of the Revolution of Dignity are protected and that freedom from corruption is a right of all Ukrainian citizens. And I would add then that as a result of this, I think Ukraine is literally showing the world the way towards the creation of this right. And sometimes these debates take place in a legal context, and that's where the issue is decided, maybe in a meeting in the United Nations, and that's where the issue is decided. But in this case, it's being decided on the streets of Ukraine and on the battlefields of Ukraine. And I think that's going to be powerful evidence going forward that the international community should adopt this freedom.
Thanks. And you have referred to corruption at the Achilles heel. Can we draw a parallel with Ukraine's current challenges, where corruption not only undermines the economy, but is also exploited by the enemy as one of the tools of hybrid warfare?
Yes, so we have seen much evidence that Russia is using disinformation, both in Ukraine and in other countries, in an attempt to delegitimize the government of Ukraine, the leadership of Ukraine, and to question whether Ukraine should be a sovereign country. And when they make these disinformation efforts, they oftentimes invoke corruption in Ukraine. And so my first response to that, and I speak on this issue frequently, is to say the real corruption, the systemic corruption that exists in the world today starts in Moscow and is based in Russia. And indeed is one of the reasons that they have gone to war. Their own government, the Russian government, is the one that should be challenged in terms of its legitimacy, and has been challenged at times in terms of its legitimacy because of this systemic corruption. So that's the first point. The second point is that when efforts have been made to, let's say, roll back the progress of the Revolution of Dignity, to undermine ongoing anti-corruption reforms, to the building of these new institutions to both punish and prevent corruption, Ukraine's civil society has spoken up, as was witnessed this July. When many Ukrainian citizens went out at the risk of their lives to the streets to protest the attempt to dilute the independence of Nabu and Sapo. And so I am inspired by the leadership shown by Ukraine's civil society and government reformers. I have to add a little bit to your biography of me. I've spent the last 10 years doing all the work that I have been doing over these past decades, focused mainly on Ukraine as a priority, starting when I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce in 2012, from 2012 to 2016. And so I believe that, to answer your question, I believe that Ukraine is in the forefront of this effort, that they have understood that they have to continue to fight corruption, even though it's a war, that they are and that they are going to fight corruption in Russia at the same time.
You have argued that the international community should establish an anti-corruption norm that would act as a trump card.
Right.
How do you envision the practical path towards such recognition, political, legal, or perhaps ethical? And what role do public servants play in this process? After all, we understand that for this trump card to work, we must have a capable and resilient public service.
Yes, that's right. And so let me speak to the role of civil servants and public servants in the fight against corruption, both in Ukraine and universally. In my view, the real heroes of the good government and democracy are the civil servants of every society. I believe that they face very difficult challenges every day to operate government, to provide public services in a timely, meaningful, and impactful way, that they are challenged with making sure that democracy delivers. So civil servants in their work require respect and require this resources to support these very difficult efforts. The most important quality of any civil servant is their integrity, is their ability as individuals to champion the work of government in a way that is honest, that is transparent, that is accessible, and that projects towards the citizenry a level of trust, to earn the trust of the citizenry. And Natalia, this is a challenge universally. It's a challenge in the United States today. It's a challenge in mature democracies such as the United States and Western Europe. It's a challenge in transition democracies. And I think that we need to continue efforts to build integrity into government as an affirmative value, as the most efficient way, if you will, to make sure that government works. If all civil servants act with integrity, then democracy works.
Yeah, and after this, I would still like to return to the topic of competitions for top positions in Ukraine's public authorities. The next panel discussion will be devoted specifically to changes in the approaches to competitive selection and the evaluation of candidates' integrity. I would like to quote your words as chair of the Selection Commission for the head of the National Agency on Corruption Prevention when the competition was first announced. You said, the main task of the Commission is to evaluate the professional experience, knowledge, and qualities of the candidates for the position of the head of the National Agency on Corruption Prevention and to determine the winner in a timely manner. The members of the Commission are ready to make every effort to ensure the objectivity, legality, and transparency of the competition. Could you please tell us, in your personal view, what specific tools helped you to ensure the objectivity, legality, and transparency of that process? Because at that time, your words really served as a powerful call for candidates to step forward and take part. And a follow-up question on the evaluation of candidates' integrity by the Selection Commission. In your opinion, how can this be done in the most effective way? How should such an assessment of integrity be organized, and perhaps should someone else be involved in this process?
Talia, thank you for that question. Let me start my answer by saying it was an honor to serve in that role. It was one of the most interesting experiences of my professional life. I was nominated by the U.S. government, but appointed by the Ukraine Cabinet of Ministers. And in the early days of the commission proceedings, I was asked by my fellow commissioners to serve as the chair of the commission. And initially I resisted because I thought that role should go to a Ukrainian citizen. As you know, the commission is comprised of 3 international experts and 3 Ukraine experts. But they eventually prevailed upon me to take this role. And it was, as I said, a very rewarding professional experience. Let me also take a minute to describe how the process worked, because it deserves further attention from the community, in the sense that the process worked successfully. And at the time, there were not many examples out there of how these selection commissions could work successfully. So we broke some new ground in this particular selection commission. It was a highly competitive process. It started with 64 candidates. It was very rigorous, competitive. It required 4 months of due diligence and evaluation. And it was initially centered, as you point out, on thorough vetting for integrity, based on significant volumes of information on the candidates provided by our own research as commissioners, by Ukraine civil society organizations, and special vetting by the government. The process was also very objective. We used standardized tests to test skills, and we required each of the candidates to write essays on ethics, their own personal view of ethics, their own understanding of the law, and their vision for the NACP. And it was also an open process. If you followed it, we did the first round of interviews, and the ensuing rounds of interviews, as the list got shorter, live on the web, on the internet. We started with interviews of 24 candidates for integrity solely, and over time we reduced that number to 10, and then we interviewed 10 candidates for 75 minutes in full public view, testing not only for integrity but also for leadership skills, for intellectual grasp of the law, for emotional intelligence. And then we conducted a very democratic voting procedure. The only really hard part of the process was the fact that the last 10 candidates were all very good. They were all very good. And it was very difficult for each of the commissioners to choose. But in the end, we ended up with a consensus candidate, Viktor Pavlushik. It was clear that he had not only scored well on all the tests, but also that he had extra qualities which would qualify him uniquely to lead this very important institution.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Murrey, sincerely, for sharing your experience and valuable insights. I'm confident that you have inspired many today and given from food for thought. It is important to keep the idea alive and to follow it through. People like you truly change the world. Thank you so much.
Natalia, thank you. And let me just add, if I may, just one point for your audience. As Ukraine's civil servants build a new government, a new culture of government, it's very important to aspire towards one standard of integrity that applies across all ministries, all line agencies, all departments, across the entire government, to have one standard that's built on one methodology and that creates, in effect, a new norm. And I am quite confident that Ukraine is capable of that, and is not only capable of doing it within Ukraine, but is capable of creating best practices in its devotion to integrity in government that can be spread across the region and across the world. So good luck with your important work and on this conference, and in the future on this vital issue for Ukraine's democracy and for global democracy.